The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you very much for joining us. My name is John Michael Cortez. I'm on the Project Connect team, and I'd like to welcome you to our online open house for the Project Connect System Vision. I'm joined on the call today by a couple of our esteemed panelists, team members. We have Joe Black with the Lone Star Rail District, which is one of the Project Connect partners, as well as Todd Hemmingson, who's the Vice President of Planning for Capital Metro. I'm also joined by Jake Durr, who's with the City of Austin's Transportation Department. And we're joined by many of you. And let me just give you just a very brief agenda for what we'll cover today. I'm going to go through maybe a 10 or 15-minute overview of both Project Connect, some of the things that we've done so far, and a little bit about the system vision and what we're trying to accomplish. And then I'm going to turn it over to you. You should be able to see on your screen a little box where you can type in questions, and feel free to do so throughout the presentation. If you'll just indulge us, we're going to go ahead and just get through the 10 or 15 minutes worth of presentation and then take the questions in the order that we receive them. And we are going to do our best to try to get to every single question, but if we do not get to every question, we will do our best to respond to you via email afterwards. We should have your email from the registration for the event. This session is also being recorded, and within a day or two of this ending, we will post the recording up on YouTube and put it on the connectcentraltexas.com website. So with that, we'll just get going. Again, thank you all for participating. This will be very similar to a presentation that was provided to attendees of the round of open houses for Project Connect that we had last week. And we had great participation both in Hays County and Williamson County and there in downtown Austin, and very pleased to get so many of you participating as well. So first, let's talk about why are we even doing this thing called Project Connect? Why have all of these Central Texas transportation agencies joined together to work on Project Connect? And you see here on the screen, we have a number of challenges and opportunities that are being faced by our region here in Central Texas today. I think most people would agree that we're very fortunate to live in Central Texas right now. We have a wonderful quality of life here. We've got great institutions of higher education and new medical facilities being built. We've got a lot of great things going on. We have an economy that's quite frankly the envy of most of the rest of the nation right now. And the challenge is that everybody else has seemed to figure that out as well. And we have so many people who are moving here every day. Forbes just named us a few months ago for the third year in a row the fastest growing region in the United States, and for 3 years in a row, excuse me, the fastest in the United States. So the growth, you all see it, it's evident. You notice it every day. So that growth is great. It brings a lot of wonderful things with it, but it also does pose some challenges that we need to address as a region. One that most people are familiar with and suffer through every day is congestion. We have a tremendous amount of traffic congestion here in Central Texas, especially on our major arterials, at what we call the peak hour, what you might call rush hour. We are one of the relatively most congested regions in the United States, especially at rush hour. And so this is an issue that seems to come up at the top whenever you survey Central Texas residents as the #1 challenge that they personally face. And so that's something that we need to deal with as a region. Second, core. A lot of the congestion that we face is in and out of the core of our region, which is the area around downtown Austin. Now, we have a lot of great things that are happening all over the 5-county area. There's wonderful things happening in San Marcos. There's wonderful things happening in Round Rock, of course. Great stuff in Elgin. All over the place. There's jobs. There's activity. But the core of our region, in and around downtown is still the big regional activity center and attractor. And you can see this. This is evident. When you're trying to get into the core, into the downtown part of Austin, let's say from Round Rock on a Monday morning, it's terrible. And when you're trying to get out of the core, headed out of downtown to, let's say, to Kyle, it's a struggle. But, and granted, there is congestion all over the place at the peak hour, but the real big issue is getting in and out of the core because it is such an attractor. We have downtown Austin as an employment and activity center, of course, but then you also add on that the Capitol complex and the tens of thousands of folks who work there, as well as the University of Texas, which has 50,000 plus students trying to get in and out of there, as well as all the faculty and staff. It becomes a challenge. It really is the big attractor for our region. However, we also have centers as an opportunity. The Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is another one of the Project Connect partners, their leadership adopted our regional plan, which is the Campo 2035 plan, which enshrined the vision for how we have come to consensus for growing as a region, and that is the development of what are called activity centers of various sizes throughout the 5-county area. So as we've mentioned before, there's one large activity center that's downtown Austin and its surrounds, but there's also smaller activity centers like downtown Round Rock, or an emerging activity center is that University Boulevard area in Round Rock where you have all those higher education institutions and hospitals and retail. There's also downtown Lockhart and Oak Hill, potentially as an emerging activity center. So those are centers that we've said we want to grow and develop as live, work, play type of opportunities where you can meet most of your daily needs in that center. Now, the other challenge that we face is not only do we need to connect these centers to that big core of our region in and around downtown Austin, but we need to connect these centers to each other. Because you may live and recreate in downtown San Marcos or in and around San Marcos, but you may have to work in Round Rock. And so not only do we want to connect these centers to the core, we need to connect them to each other where possible. So that's another opportunity or challenge that we face. The fourth is constraints. We have some constraints to expanding our roadway capacity, especially our major roadways like IH-35 and MOPAC. For example, IH-35 through downtown Austin, you really can't do much to widen that particular facility without having tremendous impacts on a lot of uses right around the highway. You have the University of Texas there on one side, you have historic cemeteries on the other side. On MOPAC, you have established neighborhoods on some side, you have environmental constraints on further south. So there's a lot of challenges to just widening all of our roadways. Also, of course, there's cost constraints to doing all of those things. So with that's a challenge, and what that really shows us is that we do need to look at alternatives. And one of the alternatives that we are looking at is high-capacity transit. We'll talk about that. So the last one is growth, and we've already mentioned it a couple of times. All of the challenges and constraints that we're dealing with here to addressing some of our regional challenges here in Central Texas are only going to get worse because we're growing so quickly. So, and what we've just enumerated are the things that we've come together, Capital Metro, the City of Austin, Lone Star Rail District, and Campo, to address congestion, especially in and out of the core of our region, the need to connect our activity centers, the constraints we have to just widening our roadway network, and then dealing with the growth that we're dealing with here in Central Texas. Again, that's why we've come together. So, as we've mentioned, the City of Austin, Capital Metro, Campo, and Lone Star Rail District have come together to address these challenges through Project Connect by advancing a high-capacity transit system for Central Texas. So I've mentioned high-capacity transit a few times already today. So what is it? Well, high-capacity transit is somewhat different from what most people see as public transportation. Most people are familiar with a local fixed-route bus or metro bus that Capital Metro operates on city streets. Really, these are a little bit more significant projects than that. To the extent possible, high-capacity transit, as is defined by the Project Connect team, is designed to the extent possible to be congestion-proof. So what does that mean? That means it has some sort of advantage over congested traffic sitting in normal travel lanes. So that it has some advantage over that so that it can deal better with congestion. So how does it do that? Well, again, the way that we've defined high-capacity transit, it's any form of public transit that has one or both of the following attributes. First, it would have some sort of dedicated lane or its own right-of-way for at least a portion of its route. That means it does not have to, at least for a piece or a portion of its travel way, doesn't have to share with automobile traffic. So, for example, Metro Rail, which you see there in the lower portion of the lower right-hand portion of the slide, it operates in an exclusive right-of-way. It doesn't share its track with anything else while it's operating other than other Metro Rail trains. And so that allows it to be very reliable, have higher travel speeds than it would have otherwise if it was sharing its right-of-way with automobile traffic. The other attribute that high-capacity transit could have is what we call transit priority. And that is some sort of other advantage over regular traffic besides right-of-way. So for example, Metro Rapid, which we'll talk about here in a moment, which is a bus rapid transit service that Capital Metro is about to introduce, will have technology on the vehicles that allow it to communicate with traffic signals and allow it to hold a green light to get through intersections faster, which allows it to be more reliable, have higher travel speeds, etc. So high-capacity transit would have one or potentially both of those particular attributes to make it as congestion-proof as possible. So those two attributes combined with other things such as fewer stops, higher speeds, more frequent service allows it to be high capacity, carries more people at a lower cost typically, especially in the peak hour. And so these are larger, more significant types of regional transit projects. So some examples of this you can see on the chart on your screen would include things like regional rail. An example of regional rail that's being developed locally is the Lone Star Rail Districts project. That would connect San Antonio to Austin and further north up to Georgetown. Now that service, you can see here some of the different attributes. It's usually used to connect different cities and regions, and it carries a lot of people. It goes pretty quickly, and it doesn't stop very often. This is not the kind of service you would want to stop very frequently, because then it would take forever for you to get from one region to the other. It would operate with higher frequency at rush hour, and you can see the attributes of that. Contrast that with, let's say, something like urban rail. In the city of Austin is currently working on an urban rail project in our congested urban core. That's typically an electrified service that can operate in its own right-of-way or in mixed traffic. It carries fewer passengers per vehicle, and it operates a little slower than a regional rail, let's say, but it stops much more frequently and is usually it usually operates on a higher frequency. So all of these things that you see listed on this chart are different kinds of high-capacity transit, and the takeaway that we want you to have from this is that these are all different tools that are designed to accomplish different things. So part of what we need to do through the Project Connect process and other processes is to determine which tool is the right tool to address the problem that we're trying to address with high-capacity transit. The other takeaway is, of course, that they're not all the same. Commuter rail is different than regional rail, is different than bus rapid transit. It's different than express transit and express lanes, which is another kind of high-capacity transit that we're evaluating through Project Connect. That one's very interesting. That would be operating express transit in managed or express lanes on some of our major highways. So those express lanes are being developed so that private automobiles can operate in them. They can pay a fee or a toll to utilize those lanes during congested periods. But buses would be able to travel in them for free, which would make them high-capacity transit because, again, they would have some sort of advantage over regular mixed traffic, everybody else stuck on MoPac. It allows us to have higher travel speeds, a greater degree of reliability, and carry more people at the peak hour for less money. So you can refer back to this. It's on our website, this particular chart, on connectcentraltexas.com, but it's really good information. I would encourage you to look at it a little bit more. So all of these agencies have come together through Project Connect to advance high-capacity transit projects and, again, to address those regional challenges. And so what we're trying to do through Project Connect is really just answer three questions. Number one, how do we implement all these various high-capacity transit projects as a system? What we want at the end of the day is a system, not a collection of different transit projects. So as a user of the service, at the end of the day, what you want is something that works. You really don't care who planned it, who built it, who's operating it. You just want it all to work. So what we're doing through answering this question is how it's going to work together as a system is look at things. Well, are we going to have 5 different passes that you would need to buy to use the system, or just one pass to use? Will they all be scheduled to work together? Will you be able to make transfers at common facilities, etc.? Will we have 5 different maps for you to look at, or one map that has an entire service system on it? So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to accomplish in developing a system through Project Connect. The second thing is organization. How will our region actually organize to develop and operate the system? So this is actually something that's a pretty significant challenge that most people aren't aware of. So for example, Capital Metro has a service area that we operate transit within. Well, the entire 5-county area is not within the Capital Metro service area. So it would be very difficult for Capital Metro to plan, build, and operate projects in pieces or portions of the region that are not even in our service area. Now, the City of Austin's jurisdiction is really only within the City of Austin. However, we have people from throughout the region who need to get in and around Austin at various points. So how do we come together as a region, all these different kinds of governments and jurisdictions, to actually develop and operate a unified system? It's actually a very complicated problem to solve, and one that we're trying to address through Project Connect. And then lastly, the third question that we're trying to answer through Project Connect is how do we pay for all of this stuff over the long term? So we not only have to figure out as a region how to equitably and sustainably fund the construction of these projects, but then also the maintenance and operation over the long term. So again, those are the 3 questions that these Central Texas transportation agencies have come together to try to answer through. So again, we have the agencies at top, the Project Connect partners, including the city, Capital Metro, Campo, the Lone Star Rail District, and others. We're working together with CTRMA, TxDOT, and others. And we've come together for Project Connect. We're being advised through a group called the Transit Working Group. This is a stakeholder group that was convened by the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, and it consists of elected officials from throughout the region, business leaders, community leaders from throughout the 5-county area. It's chaired by Austin Mayor Lee Leffingwell, but it also has the mayor of Round Rock on it, Mayor McGraw, has county commissioners from Hays County and other jurisdictions throughout the region, Chamber of Commerce folks from throughout the region, as well as just average everyday community leaders as well. They've been meeting for well over a year to advise Project Connect on how we move forward with high-capacity transit. So we're working with the advice of the Transit Working Group, working with other stakeholders. We've been briefing civic organizations like Rotary clubs and neighborhood groups and chambers of commerce, etc., from throughout the region. We've gotten advice from the public. We've had multiple open houses, including this particular open house online. We've done this a couple of times. So we've taken all of this feedback to try to develop the high-capacity transit system, and this effort is being staffed actually by staff members from each of the partners. Some of the outreach that we have undertaken thus far over the last year or so of Project Connect, we've actually had, this needs to be updated, we've now had 13 open houses, multiple in Austin, a couple now in Round Rock and Kyle and Pflugerville, and Round Rock on there twice. This is our third webinar. We've also had several stakeholders forums. Pardon me. Several stakeholders forums throughout the region. We've also had several briefings. This is just a representative sample of some of the organizations that we've briefed along the way to make sure we were getting as many perspectives as possible on the development of the regional high-capacity transit system. And of course, we heard a lot from a lot of different people, and the feedback was all over the map. However, as is typically the case, the feedback tended to fall in a couple of different areas. One, the first thing that we heard was that there was general support for a coordinated high-capacity transit system in our region. No matter where we were, there was general support. Yes, we should move forward with planning a high-capacity transit system. Now, this is great news for us. It gives us a lot of support for moving forward. The second thing we heard was that people wanted better access from some of the smaller activity centers, towns and cities in the region, especially in the Southwest corridor, into the core of our region, which is downtown Austin. Folks want to have choices to be able to get from places like Kyle, Elgin, Manor, Round Rock, Bastrop. They wanted to be able to get into and out of downtown Austin easier. However, as was mentioned before, they not only need to get into downtown Austin, they want to be able to get to other activity centers. People in Leander want to be able to get to Elgin. People in Round Rock want to be able to get to San Marcos easily and not necessarily have to go through downtown Austin. So that is something that we took into consideration in the development of the vision that we're going to talk about in a moment. More specific to central and downtown Austin, there was a desire expressed for some sort of high-capacity transit connection from the current terminus of the Metro Rail, commuter rail service there at the Convention Center in downtown Austin, over to the Seaholm redevelopment. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's in the southwest portion of downtown Austin, the old power plant. That's being redeveloped as a mixed-use development, but also as an emerging hub for future high-capacity transit. Folks said they wanted some direct connection between those two particular locations. Again, more specific to Central Austin, there was a desire for high-capacity transit service throughout Central Austin. Again, and not just downtown, but throughout all of Central Austin, there was a desire for that kind of service. In general, there was a feedback that we received was a desire for additional transportation choices in addition to driving. So people want lots of different options for how to get around. High-capacity transit, bicycling, even other driving alternatives, just different routes to be able to get to where they need to go. I think people expressed frustration. The only way they could get in and out of Central Austin was Mopac or IH-35, and so they felt like they needed more alternatives with driving as well as other kind of travel alternatives. And then finally, even though people told us they wanted those additional choices, they told us for high-capacity transit to be something that they'd be interested in, it has to be convenient. And convenient not just to where they live, but also to where they work. We have to make it convenient. And so all of this feedback that we heard, we tried to ensure we addressed in the development of the vision for how we will develop high-capacity transit for Central Texas. And this here is a map of the vision that has been developed with the help of the Transit Working Group and all of the feedback that we have received over the last year of Project Connect. And it's a little tough to see. I would encourage you all to go to connectcentraltexas.com where you can download a larger PDF for you to study in detail. But I'll just say a few words, and you can ask questions about this. As far as the colors on this, the red represents potential commuter rail connections. The green denotes bus rapid transit or metro rapid. The orange would be urban rail. And the dark dashed lines with the express transit running in express lanes on, that's Mopac and I-35 there. And then the lighter, more pink dotted lines, those would be opportunities to preserve right-of-way. So not actually building transit, but preserving right-of-way for future use. So this is a 20, 30-year vision. And as you can see, it uses all the tools in the toolbox. And we've made a sincere effort to try to address those things that we heard through the public input from Project Connect. We've made an effort to connect as many activity centers that we believe need to be connected to the region's core in downtown Austin as we could through Project Connect. We've also tried to connect several of the centers together with high-capacity transit. We've also tried to design a system that would be convenient to where many people live and many people work so that we can meet that need. And again, all of the feedback we've heard, we've tried to address through this vision. We have another representation of it that might be a little bit easier. It's a little bit more focused in on the core of our region. The blue here would denote connections that would be made, pieces of the high-capacity transit system that would be utilizing rail technologies, and green would be those utilizing bus-based technologies. So a few words about this map. First and foremost, this is a vision. It's conceptual. And this is kind of the direction we will be headed in as a region. And but that doesn't necessarily mean this is exactly what's going to be built. As we'll talk about in a second, you start with your vision, your system plan, and then you do more detailed planning on individual pieces to actually deliver projects. So we'll talk about that here in a second. The other thing that you don't see on this map is a very high-quality local bus service that will continue to be invested in and improved, that will connect other areas of the region that may not have a high-capacity transit station nearby. Our hope is that we could adjust the local bus service to be able to feed neighborhoods into the nearest high-capacity transit connection. So if your particular area of town doesn't necessarily have a high-capacity transit station right in it, we would more than likely try to connect you there via frequent, high-quality local bus service that wouldn't be high-capacity transit, but would provide you a convenient connection to the closest high-capacity transit. And we will very soon be developing some other conceptual maps that would show how the local bus service would interact with the high-capacity transit. The other thing that we accomplished through Project Connect was trying to identify, well, where do we start? We don't have the resources to develop the high-capacity transit system all at once. So we're going to have to prioritize and figure out where we start. So we took the technical data that we could gather, got input from the public, of course advice from the Transit Working Group, and we identified and screened potential high-capacity transit corridors. So I don't expect you to look at all of this or read all this, but these are some of the data points that we used. We aligned them with those 5 challenges and regional opportunities that we're trying to address, connecting centers, the level of congestion, trips in and out of the core, some of the constraints in that particular corridor, and the growth in that particular corridor. So we looked at several different data points, and we prioritized them all, and this is where we ended up. Let me get my little spotlight here. So we have all of these various travel corridors in and out of the core of our region. So think of these as watersheds, right? So think of here at 183, all of these folks who live in this area kind of drain into Research or 183 on their way into the core, right? So these are where the congestion in and out of the core is taking place. And guess what? They're all terrible. It's hard and congested getting in and out of the core in all of these corridors. But where do we start? Well, looking at all the data and getting all the input, 2 of the corridors really stood out for us needing to further high-capacity transit in them as soon as possible. One is this north corridor here in dark green. This is essentially the corridor connecting Georgetown, a couple of activity centers in Round Rock, Pflugerville, a few activity centers in North Austin, into the core of our region here in downtown. Now this is the very troubled IH-35 corridor that so many people have to contend with. And so Capital Metro is advancing what we call a corridor study, we'll talk more about that in a second, in this area that we call the North Corridor. The other corridor that came out as us needing to address right away is what we call the Central Corridor. So this is the area in Central Austin, beyond downtown, that just has a lot of congestion just trying to get in and around this particular part of the region. This is roughly the area between Research Boulevard on the north, Ben White on the south, Mopac on the west, and Bluestein on the east. So just trips originating and ending within that Central Austin area are very, very difficult. And the city of Austin is advancing high-capacity transit in this particular area. That's the urban rail program that they're working on. So all of these other corridors we'd eventually like to study for high-capacity transit. But again, based on the data and the input, these are the two that we're starting on right away. So again, I know we've got lots of questions. We're just about done, and then we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can in the time we have remaining. Bear with me for another moment. So what are the next steps, and what is the actual process? Well, it is a long and drawn-out process, but that's important because when you build high-capacity transit, these kinds of investments in infrastructure are around for a long, long time. And they're expensive, and they have big impacts on the communities around them. So we want to make sure to take the time to do it right. And there is a logical process that we follow. First, we start with the regional plan. That's the Campo 2035 plan. That's the big picture plan and vision for how we will grow as a region, and then how we will connect our activity centers together. Not just with high-capacity transit, but also with roadways, bicycle infrastructure, etc. That's the big, big plan. Campo is actually about to kick off this spring, more than likely, a process to update the 2035 plan. They update it every few years. This will be the 2040 plan. Part of that would be, folded into that would be Project Connect, which is the system plan. For high-capacity transit, this is the vision for the development of the system that will get rolled up into the Campo plan. But it looks at things like connectivity, organization, sequencing, the corridors that will be addressed. That's Project Connect, the system plan. Once you have that vision in place, then the next step is to go through corridor studies. So those corridors that we showed you, we need to do a more detailed look at what are the problems in those corridors that need to be addressed, what are the different ranges of range of alternatives, potential solutions to address those challenges in that corridor, and then what are the costs and the benefits of each one of those alternatives, and then we select actual projects to advance forward through this process. The next step would be preliminary design and environmental analysis. So you start roughly designing these particular projects and figure out what some of the impacts would be if they are built. And then, assuming it moves forward, you get into final design, detailed design of where it's actually going to go, where it's going to stop, what it's going to look like, etc. Then you build it and test it, and then you start operating it. So it is a long, complicated process. The good news is that we have several pieces of our high-capacity transit system vision that are at various stages of this process. Metro Rail, the commuter rail service from Leander to downtown Austin, is already open to the public, in operation, and very, very successful. Standing room only in the peak hour and peak direction, Monday through Friday, and also full for special events. So that's already here. Metro Rapid, which is the bus rapid transit service that Capital Metro is about to implement, is in construction. Stations are under construction today, and as we'll see here in a minute, that's going to be delivered to the public in next year. We also have express transit and express lanes. The MOPAC managed lanes are in this area, somewhere in between preliminary design and environmental analysis and final design. Actually, I think it's in final design at this point. They're starting that. So those are on the way very soon. So those pieces of the system will be up and running. The North Corridor study, obviously, is in the corridor study phase. Urban Rail is here around the preliminary design environmental analysis stage. So we have various pieces of the system that are already moving forward. Even though we're just now finishing the system plan, we're not going to have to wait on some of these projects. They're already underway. This is just a different representation of what I just mentioned. So right now we've got a great Metro bus service that will continue to get better, and we have Metro Rail, which is operating very successfully. Very soon to be in operation as part of the high-capacity transit system will be Metro Rapid in 2014. Again, Express Transit in the Mopac Express lanes in 2015. The next steps, Lone Star Rail is continuing and making great progress on the development of the interregional connection between San Antonio and north of Austin, which will also be integrated into our region's high-capacity transit system. As I mentioned, Capital Metro and our partners are advancing the North Corridor study to identify high-capacity transit solutions for that very congested corridor. And then, of course, the City of Austin is developing Urban Rail to address challenges within the Central Corridor. But Urban Rail is also a little special. Not only would it be addressing congestion and mobility challenges just within the Central Corridor, as you will look at in the vision, it also acts as the glue for all of these other pieces. It provides a lot of the connectivity between whatever may come out of the North Corridor and Metro Rapid and Metro Rail. It really is kind of the glue that ties it all together. So that's a very critical next step. The other pieces that are in the future are express transit on IH-35. TxDOT and its partners are working on a study called Mobility 35. One of the things that we hope will come out of that is some opportunity to accommodate high-capacity transit on IH-35. So that's into the future. And then all of those other corridors that we identified that have challenges, we need to get to and study for high-capacity transit to implement that particular piece of the system. So again, this vision that we've developed, the map that you saw, is not just some fantasy, colorful map that we've put together. We are already operating some pieces of it. We have some pieces of it that are right about to come online, and we're taking the steps that we need to bring you the next pieces and hope to take more steps in the future. So this thing is moving forward. Okay, I've talked to you enough. Now, what I'd like to do is try to get to as many of your questions as we possibly can in the time that we have left. So let me bring some of this together. So again, participants, you should be able to type into a box and have your type in your question, and we will try to get to as many of them as we can. So let me identify the first few questions. Just bear with me. Again, feel free to type in any questions that you may have. We have, here we go. Let's see. We had Lorna ask, is there a way to enlarge the map/legend? For one of the maps, we do not have a legend. So this is the map. If this is the map you're thinking of, again, let me just go over those colors. Hopefully I've answered that. But we have the red, which has commuter rail. Actually, that's a good point. Let me just go to our website. Again, you can download a big copy of this all. I'm going to go ahead and share my browser. Take a look at it. If you just go to connectcentraltexas.com, you can see there's a downloaded detailed map PDF, and there you go. Shrink it a little bit so you can see it. So you see here we have urban rail in the orange, commuter and regional rail, rapid bus, the express lanes, and right-of-way preservation. Sorry that the slide itself didn't have the legend on it, but you should be able to download this and look at it as much as you want to. Let me go back here, and let me get to the next question. So let's see. Andrew says, hi, I just wanted to say that I'm a 20-year-old student at UT, and I support Project Connect greatly. My generation is particularly shunning cars and more, whether it is driving their cars less or not driving cars at all. biking, riding, bus, and walking. Great. Thanks, Andrew. We're glad to hear that. And our hope is that we all live long enough to see this system develop. It is going to take a while, and it is going to be a challenge. There's a lot of work we need to do with the community to do it, but we're hopeful to deliver this to you. Another Andrew, a different Andrew, just make sure it's it is. Well, no, it's the same Andrew. Says he wants to voice his support for an urban rail line to support both downtown and UT. I would like to see a line that goes down the drag into downtown. I'm not sure how feasible it would be. It's costly, but if the line could possibly put underground along the drag, there are so many students that move up and down the drag every day that it would benefit from this. I think the University of Texas should get involved with this. Well, I appreciate the comments. So we have, you can see here on the Project Connect vision, we envision urban rail going down both the west side of University, here hopefully you can see my cursor, and then also the east side of the University. So it looks like in the vision eventually we'll have, I don't know about underground, that can be pretty expensive. And there's some things that are good about having things on ground, at grade. Let me actually call in some of our panelists. I think my voice has been heard long enough. See if they want to address that at all. Joe, again, as we have on the line Joe Black and Todd Hemmingson from Lone Star Rail District and Capital Metro, respectively. Gentlemen, did you want to weigh in on that question at all?
Sure. This is Todd. I'll comment on the underground part of it, and that's something that we hear from time to time. And you heard John Michael earlier mention the concept of congestion proof, and that certainly is one of the benefits of running at a different level than all the normal traffic. That being said, one of the big challenges, of course, is that the cost for running in a underground or a subway typically is somewhere three times as much as running at surface. So that's one of the big challenges, of course, and you see very few subway systems being built across the country for that very reason. It's just very, very costly. But there are benefits. So at the end of the day, in a very long-range plan, it may be something that's looked at.
Right. Yeah, this is Joe Black from Lone Star Rail. One of the, early on in the presentation, you saw John Michael talk about constraints as one of the 5 challenges and opportunities we have. And the reality is that, one of the constraints is the availability to pay for this. We want to get good high-capacity solutions in place as soon as we can and as reasonably as we can. Subway is one of those high-capacity transit modes that is usually on the back end of development. You'll see larger cities doing subway. They have the financial resources and, frankly, the need to do that. There's not a great need to tunnel just yet, but as Todd said, as we advance this plan further into the future, maybe this is after we're retired even, subway could become an option.
Great. Well, I got you here. I neglected to ask you when I was done with the presentation. Is there anything you guys want to add to anything I've said before we get to more questions?
This is Todd again. The one thing I would add is, and you made some mention of this, but I think it's really important to emphasize the fact that all these pieces work together. And it's the connections between them and the various choices that they can provide when you have a robust network where there are opportunities to move between different alignments, different service types, and all the connectivity that provides and the choices that it gives the community when they want to travel that really makes a big difference. And so one line, just like one section of roadway, in and of itself can do some things, but it's when the power of the network is what really makes this an attractive vision in our view.
Yeah, I would add to that the analogy for this that I've heard actually came from John Hockenhuis, an economist who actually presented to the Transit Working Group within the last 6 to 8 months. And the analogy that he had was a telephone system. If you have a telephone system that has 2 telephones connected to each other, it doesn't have really a whole heck of a lot of utility. As you begin to add nodes, telephones to the system, the utility grows exponentially. So we've tried, in this process to make sure that we touch and hit and connect enough activity centers. I think we hit 8 out of 12 or 9 out of 12 with this system, with this vision, so that you increase the utility. You can have people that need to get to the core get easily to the core, but with these seamless transitions and seamless transfers, with fare integration and schedule integration, you make it possible to get all the way around the area, as John Michael said, to connect centers to centers. So, it opens up the possibility of someone, say, living in New Braunfels and working in Round Rock, whereas today it would be, the travel and the expense of that would probably be prohibitive.
Thank you, guys. We have another question from Andrew. Andrew was a prolific asker today. Good questions, though. Andrew wants to know what else is being done to support biking in Project Connect. He really wants to see Austin continue to build more separated bike lanes. I think he thinks UT should be pressured to help solve the transportation issues around campus. There needs to be more bike lanes to support the very high number of cyclists around UT. Jake here with the City of Austin may take that one.
Andrew, there's a number of things going on right now. They're looking at connecting bicycle and pedestrian facilities to transit. One of them, you may or may not know, Capital Metro recently installed some bike lockers and has plans to expand that service at a lot of their Metro Rail stations. The Transportation Department, where I work, we work really closely with the Public Works Department to look at how these services are sort of married together. One of the things the Public Works Department is pursuing right now is the bike share system in downtown Austin. And one of the key kind of qualifiers for where those kiosks or stations for bike share might be located is how would it tie into high-capacity transit investments downtown in the future. So there is a lot going on, actually, and we work pretty closely in constant contact with the community of cyclists and our sister departments to make sure these are all fitting together well.
I would just add, this is Joe Black from Lone Star, I would add to that the vision for the L-Star system is to provide space on board trains for bikes, to provide bike lockers at stations, but also to provide access through our regional fare card or through our regional fare smartphone app that will be available for people across the region from Georgetown to San Antonio, would be to offer car share and bike share at our suburban stations, so that if you have an appointment to go to, say, in Schertz, that's 3 miles from the rail station, you could use your smartphone app to buy your rail ticket and also to reserve your car share or your bike share to get you that last mile to your appointment and then come back to the station and back on the train. So we're definitely looking at integrating bike and pedestrian, especially around our station areas, to make our station areas very walkable and bike friendly, to incorporate that into the project. I think it's an important piece, especially in an area like Austin that has a pretty large population that likes to get around by bike.
Thank you. So Tom asked, can you expand on how/if this goes through Pflugerville? So, let me pull up that part of the vision here. Yeah. We don't have Pflugerville marked here, but Todd, do you want to address that one?
Sure. This is Todd again. One thing that has been looked at is the use of what used to be the Missouri-Kansas freight rail line, now abandoned and called the MoCan corridor. And so as John Michael mentioned, the system plan is a high-level look, and we're drilling down into more detail with our North Corridor study. And in that study, just earlier this morning, in fact, we met with our project advisory group led by the mayor of Round Rock and presented 6 concepts that we've developed. Most, if not all of those, have transit service to Pflugerville. We heard pretty clearly from the community that there were some concerns about using MoCan directly through the heart of Pflugerville. So we're looking at using that abandoned rail right-of-way, perhaps leading up to Pflugerville from the south, and then looking at some different alignment opportunities through Pflugerville to not be as disruptive as, again, some of the concerns we heard from our public meetings about running directly through on that alignment next to railroad. I'm not sure if it's an avenue or a street. But suffice it to say, I guess, that And we'll be doing public meetings in the next couple months on the North Corridor study where we'll be sharing those alternatives we've developed. So we would certainly invite your participation there. But there are several different ways we have proposed to connect Pflugerville to the rest of the system.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. The next question by Jeb wants to know, would the Elgin and Georgetown rail line really connect along 290 to the existing red line, or would they use the existing Mocan line in East Austin? And I think we have on our conceptual vision map here that piece that he's talking about is, hey, would this go down 290 this way, or would it go through this existing track that Capital Metro owns here, which we have slated for right-of-way preservation? Is that correct, Todd? That's the way that it's being envisioned in the map?
Yes. When that was put together, there was a concept as shown to use 290. Again, going back to that, the process of how this works, we'll look at that in more detail as we end up ultimately getting to the corridor study. That will refine the specific details of how the alignment would best work and really looking at the pros and cons, trade-offs and options for those different alternatives.
Great. Okay, so the next question we have is from Michael. Michael wants to know, would it be possible for West Austin near downtown to have a stop on the commuter/regional rail where it currently turns east? For me, personally, I would never use the system unless I had access to connect Northwest Austin without having to drive to connect to a rail. So let me try to get to blow up that piece of the map here. So I think what Michael's referring to is trying to have a stop over here where the commuter rail is envisioned to cross the urban rail here as it goes out to West Austin. Yeah, I think what he's saying is he would like to be able to get from West Austin near downtown to have a stop on the commuter regional rail where it currently turns east. So I think the stop would be Seaholm in that area, and the areas that could be accessed that are in the northwest would be starting at 35th, and there would be a stop at Breaker. And again, this is all conceptual. Or there'd be an opportunity to use the MOPAC lanes, the express trains running in express lanes to go down MOPAC and 183, or continue, I don't know where northwest he needs to go, but to continue up the northwest corridor and commuter rail. Now again, bear in mind that even if there's not a station exactly where you need to go, the chances are we would be looking to provide, if the demand is there, to connect areas with our local transit to make the connection seamless and as convenient as possible if you need to get somewhere that's not directly on a high-capacity transit station. In addition, as has already been discussed, we would want to make sure that we integrate with other that is called the last mile challenge. How do people get that last mile to or from the station to where they need to go? We would hope to work with other, and we already do this, with other options like Car2Go, other car sharing, the bike share that's been mentioned, or people using their own bikes. So there's a number of different options that you could be able to take advantage of so that you wouldn't have to drive to a station. Certainly we prefer that you don't drive to a station if at all possible because providing parking is very expensive. So that is definitely something that has been considered and would continue to be considered as we develop this system. Anything to add to that, guys?
This is Joe from Lone Star Rail. Yeah, the thing I would say there is that it's the reason why there may not be a station right there where the gentleman would like it is it's a technological issue more than anything else. The rail technology that we anticipate using on the regional and commuter rail services is diesel powered. It'll be clean biodiesel, you know, all the good stuff there, but in the end it's a diesel powered train. Those tend to be lower performance in accelerating. So that's the reason why way back on that one of those first few slides that John Michael showed where it broke down the differences between modes, why you see such long distances between stations. One of the reasons is because in order to get up to good track speed, you need to have some good distance between stations. So that's one of the technological and modal differences that you'll see between commuter and regional rail, say, and urban or light rail. Urban and light rail is normally electrically powered, and that type of rail equipment can get up to speed and down from speed much more quickly. It's much more appropriate for, you know, those stops every 4 blocks, half mile that urban rails plan to have.
Right. The next question is from Jace. He wants to know where he can find some of the data that went into this analysis. So I think if you mean the data that we talked about would have been the corridor prioritization, the corridor screening. We don't have the detailed data posted yet. I think we can get that posted online pretty quickly. Do you foresee a challenge with that, Joe or Todd? The corridor screening data, that's the data he's referring to?
I don't think so. I mean,
Joe, I don't know if it's in
go
a
ahead,
format. Joe. I was just going to say, I don't know if it's in a format right now that we could post. A lot of it is kind of in working format, you know, it's in collections of Excel workbooks, but we could probably get to a point where we could do that, I think, to show the backup, you know, kind of to show our work.
We do have this. Well, just going to add, we do have that table, the matrix that evaluated each of the corridors. We could certainly, that's been made available already, so, and then included in some of the presentations.
But as follow-up to this, we'll work to post that matrix in the detailed data as soon as we can. Okay. Christy makes a comment. She finds it very concerning that the map doesn't show Pflugerville and shows high-capacity rail running through the middle of Pflugerville, even after all of the concerns voiced at the most well-attended open house that you've conducted. So I think what Christy's referring to, and Todd mentioned it earlier, is for the North Corridor project, which is, again, studying that particular area in greater detail beyond the vision that we have here in the map. One of the big concerns that we heard early in Pflugerville, some members, especially of the community that lives right along the railroad tracks in the middle of Pflugerville, along that Mocan right-of-way, were very concerned about trains coming through their neighborhood and the impacts of that. And certainly that's a very, you know, it's a concern that they're very valid to suggest. We did also hear from lots of people who did want it going right through the middle of Pflugerville. But, you know, certainly that concern that was expressed is one that we have to take a look at because there are going to be impacts wherever you put these things. People there also did express that they would like us to evaluate potentially instead running it down SH-130. And we actually expanded, as a result of that feedback, the study area for the North Corridor to include the SH-130 area. We weren't initially going to study that. So that's our reaction to that. The conceptual vision does still show commuter rail going through Pflugerville. However, as Todd mentioned, you know, this is a conceptual vision. This is kind of our direction moving forward, but that corridor study will really get into those impacts and define final alignments and stops, etc. Todd, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think you covered it. I was just trying to find the dates. Well, the the public meetings for the North Corridor project, where we'll be showing the alternatives that we've developed, are slated for I believe the 3rd week of April. We'll be putting information about those on the website and otherwise getting the word out about to invite citizens and to come see what we've come up with and get your input. But that's coming up in mid-April.
So in mid-April, we will likely show some alternatives for high-capacity transit that in the North Corridor, maybe through Pflugerville or around Pflugerville, that people could consider. So whatever comes out of that corridor study as the project moving forward, that would be amended. This high-capacity transit vision map would be amended to reflect the actual project that comes out of the corridor study, correct, Todd?
Yes, that's right.
And so the public will have a chance to comment on that. So, Christy, we did hear you and your neighbors, and you know, we certainly will advance some alternatives to reflect that, but through the North Corridor project. And So stay tuned for those meetings in April, where we'll really dive into details about how this is going to work within Pflugerville. Jake, did you want to add something?
If I could piggyback really quick on this question and just use it as a chance to remind folks that the map that we've developed here is really a compromise between giving a vision and giving geographic data. Some of the stuff isn't to scale, so if it looks like something should be closer or further away from something, just bear in mind that it very well could be, but we're really trying here to give you a pretty broad brush scope of what the vision is and not overwhelm you with so many bits of data that it's confusing. And as you can learn about specific parts of this vision on an individual basis, or if you inquire about it, we can provide you more granular, detailed data about where proposed routes could go through community X or Y.
So let me just stop and do a little housekeeping here. It's already 1 o'clock. This was posted to go from 12 to 1. So I'm sure there's many folks who need to move on to something else. Unless anybody else has an objection, I think we should keep going because there's lots more questions to answer. If you have to sign off, remember this is being recorded and will be posted. So if we haven't gotten to your question, we'll try to get to a few more questions if we can. Todd and Joe, if you can hang on with us for a few more minutes. We'll try to get to a few more questions, and then anything we don't get to, we'll follow up via email. Does that sound okay? Assuming it does. Okay, so Christy goes on to ask, can you speak to why you wouldn't want to run the rail next to SH-130 rather than the middle of the city? But I'll let Todd address that in greater detail, but I think it comes down to access. If it were running, one of the trade-offs would be, if it ran down SH-130, it may have less impact on some neighborhoods. However, it would also mean less access to other neighborhoods. So those are some of the trade-offs we would have to consider. But Todd, is there anything else you want to add to that?
I think that's right. I mean, one of the things we've looked at throughout this development of this plan has been the trade-off between serving existing development versus serving, given, as you mentioned at the forefront, the tremendous growth coming our way, is there's also an opportunity to perhaps put a line out where we know growth is coming, and so that's a trade-off to be considered, and certainly that's exemplified by either going through Pflugerville right where there's already a lot of things happening, or look out to 130 where we know in the future there will be a lot of things happening.
Hey, John Michael, this is Joe from Lone Star. One of the things that we looked at when we looked at what we call our 4 C's and a G, congestion, core, one of the things we looked at is constraints. And, in that area around Pflugerville, and actually in that whole north corridor there are really a few identifiable opportunities that aren't necessarily constrained in the sense of there's already an existing right-of-way. That former MoCan Railroad right-of-way was one of several. I-35 is another one, improvements to I-35, and the other one is SH-130. So while I understand the citizens' concerns for sure, I think that line that's shown on the map right now really just represents sort of a desire for travel between Georgetown, Round Rock, Pflugerville, and downtown Austin. The form that will take will be determined by this corridor study, which, as Todd mentioned, is really getting stages and is ongoing. And there'll be plenty of opportunity coming up. The near-term one is in April, as Todd mentioned, to get citizen input. There's always a trade-off between putting transit service into a town. A lot of people want to be able to walk to the train station. They don't want to have to drive and park. But there are trade-offs there with, it will be increased noise, and it will be, trains going through downtown, which happens thousands of times a day all over the world, but in a place where it hasn't happened in a long time, we certainly understand the concern. So the good news is that we have options. That it doesn't have to, that's not the only option for a transit service in that north corridor. I think you'll see when Todd and his team present those 6 alternatives that there are some really, really innovative, good alternatives to serve that north corridor that don't involve going through the middle of Pflugerville.
Great. Okay, next question, a little bit different topic, different part of the region. And I'll just say, as an aside, Capital Metro, we operate so much around Central Austin. One of the great things in this partnership with Project Connect is we've been able to get outside of Austin, talk to places like Pflugerville, Round Rock, San Marcos, Elgin, Bastrop, some of these other areas, Oak Hill, well past Oak Hill, and the concerns are so different all around town. But everybody seems to want, as we talked about, general consensus. They want choices, including high-capacity transit, but the perspective on it is so different from where it depends on where you are in the region. The next question is more focused on downtown and Austin in particular. Patricia asks, as a resident of downtown Austin, I want to know how this proposed bus rail service will operate when we have a 5K race that boxes us in. For example, a bus from downtown north on Guadalupe doesn't go anywhere near key stops between downtown and the university area. At least I've never been able to determine from Cap Metro info online. How will these new transit routes be affected? Will they have a priority they don't have now? So Jake, did you want to mention anything about that?
Patricia, don't have a very sort of specific answer to that question, but I do want to let you know that the Transportation Department has an entire team devoted towards traffic management plans and transit plans, and work very closely with Capital Metro and a lot of the special events downtown. And we really can't tackle those questions until we get a better sense for each specific event and have an understanding of what transit service is on the ground when those events are happening. But regardless, it's something that would probably be paid pretty close attention, and there's already a lot of hardworking folks who are diligently addressing on a pretty weekly basis, given all the events we have downtown.
Great. Also, I think it's trying to get at what you were asking about the bus service. I mean, the Metro Rapid will actually have several stops between, well, not several, it will have stops on Guadalupe and Lavaca between downtown and the university. Now, it's not going to stop as frequently as the local bus service, but there will be stops there. And it will have a priority on Lavaca and Guadalupe between MLK and Cesar Chavez that it doesn't have now. It'll have the transit priority lanes. It will also have the traffic signal priority at many intersections. And I imagine it may have some in the university area, but I'm not certain. But in any case, it will have priority that it doesn't have now. But local service will still operate on those corridors, even if we're operating high-capacity transit on those corridors as well. So you should still be able to have access to the stops you need when you need them. Let's see. Jennifer asks or comments that although the airport is not in an area of increased growth, the airport is a significant supporter of special events and businesses in downtown and surrounding areas. Why would you wait to provide the rail to the airport when the growth of the corridor between the airport and downtown is growing rapidly along with the growth of the city? Well, all of that is very true. And on the vision, you'll see that we do envision high-capacity transit in the form of urban rail coming down Riverside, down 71 out to the airport. We also have in the plan a future right-of-way preservation along this semi-abandoned, or actually I think it is abandoned, rail spur here. I think it's called the Bergstrom Spur. That runs from south of, it runs right along St. Elmo, really, out to the airport. So what we're saying in this vision is that we should have high-capacity transit out to the airport and then preserve right-of-way that will allow additional high-capacity transit out to the airport at some point in the future. Yeah, Jake wants to jump in.
Jennifer, one of the things that have been touched on before is when we're planning this vision, how do we create systems that we can get on the ground within the constraints that we have? Currently, one of the sort of issues that we would have to look at to get south of the river on the urban rail system is how do you actually cross the river, and along Riverside there's a number of bridges that would also have to be upgraded and or looked at to see how you cross a number of stream crossings. I do want to let you know that currently the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority, who's also a great partner with a lot of the folks who are on the phone here, are doing some studies to look at how would you implement a managed lane, much like what we can see on MOPAC here, going out to the airport. So it could accommodate high-capacity transit. It could accommodate additional capacity for bike ridership and pedestrians, but it could also accommodate additional capacity for cars to go out there. So it is something that's on the ground and happening now. There was a study that was started in 2011, and it's expected to be completed in 2014, which is next year. And obviously, we'll all try to keep the public abreast of that as it progresses.
I also want to get to one of the questions she asked, why you would wait to go out to the airport, and that might get at our corridor ranking. So again, why we're focused on the North Corridor and the Central Corridor as opposed to the Southeast Corridor. Again, it goes to what we heard from the public. It goes to what all the data showed us in the corridor prioritization or corridor screening. You know, we looked at the growth issues. There is quite a bit of growth in that Southeast Corridor, that's for certain. However, the growth is much higher in the North Corridor. So that was kind of a point for the North Corridor. If we look at existing congestion, certainly existing congestion is pretty tough there in that Southeast Corridor, but I think it's fair to say that it's even more severe in the North Corridor and in the Central Corridor. And so we could go down the line, how many centers we'd be connecting if we went southeast versus north. What were the other ones? The core, the trips in and out of the core are probably a little bit different, and then again the future growth we already talked about. So it wasn't anything personal towards the airport, but I guess the north and the central corridors are where the prioritization screening came out that we should focus next for high capacity transit. Doesn't mean it doesn't need high capacity transit. It just means we're going to focus on those other two first. Anything you want to add to that, Todd? By the way, if you haven't ridden the Metro Airport out to the airport, it's a fantastic service.
Yeah, I think Todd had to step out. He typed a message to staff that I think he's got another meeting to go to. What I would add to that is that, John Michael, first of all, you hit it right on the head. I mean, we had to go through a prioritization process given that we have limited resources in terms of financial resources. We think that they're fairly considerable. We think that we have really good projects that are very competitive, so we'll be eligible for federal funding. But still, at the end of the day, there's a limited source of funding, and it's really a funding stream over a series of years. So, the good news is that we're going to get to the airport. It's just we're not going to get there first because it happens to lie on a lower priority corridor. And one of the things, I mean, I've been in the passenger rail industry for almost 30 years now. One of the kind of truisms about providing airport rail service, surprisingly, it often is not the highest ridership line in your system. It carries a lot of airport workers and people who work every day at the airport who really appreciate having that rail link. But in terms of special event service and things like that, it will be definitely a positive for us, for the city and for the region. But on a day-to-day basis, the ridership is pretty much fair to middling. It's worth doing, but I don't think it'll have quite the impact that folks think that it will on system ridership. I think concentrating on those corridors, the North Corridor and the Central Corridor, where we know there's a great deal of ridership potential there, makes more sense from a cost standpoint. But like I said, the good news is we're getting to the airport. It's part of the vision. It's not in the first phase.
Okay. And just briefly, just to close on that project that I mentioned earlier, if anybody's interested in that, you can go to mobilityauthority.com, and on the top there's a tab that says Projects and Programs. If you click on the follow-up link to the Bergstrom Expressway, you can learn more about that.
Great. Well, it's 15 after 1, so we're 15 minutes over, but there's still, I think, 37 of you that are still on the call. So, Joe, if you don't have any objections, maybe another 15 minutes. We'll get through some more of these questions.
Sure thing. I can hang out.
Okay. So Andrew asked, or comments for Bastrop, Lockhart, even Mustang Ridge are centers on the Campo 2035 plan, but they aren't served by transit in the vision. Why? This is a long-range vision, isn't it? That's a good point, Andrew. They're not. There are several centers in the Campo 2035 plan. Those are those areas that are identified to absorb a lot of our future growth, kind of as different sizes of mixed-use activity centers. There's a lot of them that are in the Campo plan that are not connected as part of this vision. Well, a couple of things I'd say to that. One is that, remember, this is the high-capacity transit vision. That doesn't necessarily mean that Bastrop, Lockhart, and Mustang Ridge, and actually I was out in Bastrop quite a bit for Project Connect. Joe and I were both out there, actually. And we told them that, it may not be that high-capacity transit needs to come to Bastrop or Lockhart, in the next 10, 20 years. That doesn't mean you're not going to get transit. It may be really good commuter express buses on 183 or 71, but that perhaps that particular corridor doesn't yet justify the high investment in something more significant like high-capacity transit. Doesn't mean they can't get high-quality transit. It just may not be high-capacity transit. Anything to add to that, Joe?
I think that pretty well covers it. It again comes down to our corridor prioritization, what we see not only currently, but also what we see in terms of growth going out. And there's no doubt going to be growth there. It's probably not great enough within at least our planning horizon to justify looking at rail and things like that out there. But John Michael's exactly right. There's plenty of opportunity for regular transit service, for express bus commuter service, and those type of things, which I think would serve that area very well. Of course, if conditions change, this is one of those quote-unquote living documents. As conditions change going forward, we may see other corridors rise in their importance. And in fact, one of the things that we've identified as part of Project Connect are the things that jurisdictions, cities in those lower priority corridors could do to boost themselves in the rankings. There are certain things that they can do to make themselves more attractive for high-capacity transit. So these things can all change. This is where we are now. 10 years from now, we get some projects installed on the ground, we take another reassessment, and, maybe we come up with a different vision or just a modified vision from what we have.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. So Carrie, a new asker, has a question. When do you envision the current rail system will begin running on weekend mornings and afternoons? So that's a little bit different question. Carrie, we get that request all the time. People love, I think it's a testament to, if you put good high-capacity transit like Metro Rail on the ground, people use it, they fill it up, and they want to use it more. So we're excited that we get that kind of question all the time. And one of the reasons why we're doing Project Connect is we want to provide you with more of it. But specifically with Metro Rail service hours, it's going to be a function of budget, quite frankly. Capital Metro's budget, we're still recovering slowly from the recession. Most of Capital Metro's operating funding comes from sales tax. And during the recession, we took a big hit. And so we had to scale back a lot of things we'd like to do. Our economy here in Austin's recovering. As I mentioned, we're doing very well. Sales tax is recovering. However, we're not at the point yet where we can add a bunch of service either on Metro Bus or Metro Rail. We hope to be able to do so in the next couple of years, but we've got to be prudent and conservative in doing that to make sure we don't get ahead of ourselves. But we hear you, and we hear from hundreds of other people who ask us for more service on Metro Rail. They want to ride it, and we hope to be able to do that soon. Carrie goes on to ask, are there people involved who have implemented this sort of transit in other cities like Houston? Actually, yes. Joe, you can answer that one, but we also have several consultants working on the project that have implemented systems in Houston, Dallas, etc. Joe, you might be able to address that better than I.
Yeah, there are a lot of very experienced people on the project. Both, there are some staff people like myself. I've been doing this for almost 30 years. I've worked on rail projects around the country from Philadelphia, New York City, Chicago, San Francisco. I've run a commuter rail system in Chicago. So there's me on staff. There are folks at our consultants who have even more extensive resumes than that, who have worked on projects like this all over the country. In addition, one of the things that the City and Capital Metro are advancing right now is the hiring of what's called an Urban Rail Program Lead, a new position jointly funded by both of those organizations, who will kind of lead the effort for Urban Rail moving forward as kind of as a program lead. I know a few of the people that we've been talking to. I know sort of the leading candidate. I know several of the other candidates, and they were all eminently qualified. They've all done this kind of thing before. They've delivered these kind of projects before. So it's a good question because this is totally new for our area, having people that have gone through this before and done this before is really, really helpful. We would like to not repeat mistakes if possible. So it's a good thing to have experienced folks working with us.
Okay. New question. Gwen says she has not heard nor does she see any reference to pedestrian or bicycle groups being involved. How do these groups get a seat at the table? It would be great to ensure that all those paths and trails are connected. Well, Gwen, we do have, we work very closely. Capital Metro does, and of course the City of Austin Transportation Department does, with bicycle infrastructure, the bike advocacy communities, etc. Now, because we're still kind of in conceptual phase, it's probably not prudent at us to say, okay, well, we're going to connect this here and connect that there. Definitely we want to make that conversation happen. It's probably more appropriate to have happen during the corridor or final design. And somewhere between corridor and final design, start talking about, okay, as we actually get into the detailed design of a system, are we going to be accessible by pedestrian and bicycle trails? At this level, again, we're planning the high-level regional view of how the system will work together and connect places. But absolutely, as we've talked about, Capital Metro and Lone Star Rail and the city both plan to integrate cycling with the high-capacity transit. We're already doing a heck of a job of it with Metro Rail. Those trains are, we almost have too many bikes on the trains. And we're, as Jake mentioned earlier, we're now investing in secure, monitored bicycle storage at stations because we have so many bikes and want to make that connection happen. Capital Metro just broke ground on a bicycle and pedestrian trail along airport to connect some of our stations to neighborhoods. So we get it. We've drank that Kool-Aid. We know we need to do that. This is probably for the system vision, not the right or best time to think about those particular connections. Is that on base, Joe?
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I don't really have much to add to that, but yeah.
Okay. Jake, do you have something to mention?
Just to piggyback on that, it's something that we had mentioned in a lot of the outreach that we did previously, but if there are specific groups, whether you represent cyclists, pedestrians, or circus managers who are interested in this vision and a presentation to your group, you can email myself, John, Michael, Joe, any of us, and we can help facilitate that presentation.
Great. What can the citizens in our community do to help your efforts, to ask another Carrie, Carrie? Well, Carrie, thank you for offering that. As Jake just mentioned, we need to get this vision out in front of people and get their feedback and answer their questions about it. So if you have a group, as Jake said, that we would love to come talk to you, whether it's for 5 minutes or we can talk about this stuff. Obviously, we've already talked about it for an hour and a half. But we would love to come show people what our vision is and get their feedback. So, and once we do that, we're also, again, we don't want to sit on our hands. We want to move this forward. As Todd mentioned earlier before he signed off, we're advancing Capital Metro and our partners in North Corridor study. So if you happen to be in and around the North Corridor, we need you to go to those meetings and give us feedback on the specific projects in that particular corridor. The City of Austin's advancing the Urban Rail project. They're very soon going to have more meetings to talk about how do we, one, provide high-capacity transit in the central corridor to address mobility and to connect the eventual regional system that becomes Project Connect. So we need you to know and attend those meetings. And I know it's a lot of meetings to go to, but it's really important, Carrie, that we get your input and other people's input so that at the end of the day, we can deliver a system that's going to work for people and that reflects what their concerns and the opportunities they want us to capitalize on. Anything else to add to that, fellas?
No, just piggyback on what John Michael said and just emphasize that I think the best thing citizens can do to help the future is become educated and become involved and arm themselves with the information so that when they're talking to their friends or their colleagues, they can become sources of information fast.
Okay, so thanks again for that, Carrie. The existing Red Line commuter rail is shown in the vision as extending across downtown from the Convention Center to Guadalupe, extended 3 more blocks, and it connects with the commuter regional rail serving the west side of Austin, Central Texas. This would allow a seamless commuter rail system connecting the whole region. Why the 3-block gap? Well, I think there's some technical challenges on that one. Joe, do you have the specifics on that? Let me zoom to that little piece.
This is the specifics on the vision plan for inner red line?
Yeah, so I guess through downtown, what the red line is downtown.
Yeah. Okay. You know, one of the and gosh, I wish Todd was still here so he could speak on this. What the vision plan says is that, and again, I wish Todd was here to provide me with the statistics, but kind of my understanding that. It's been my understanding that most of the ridership on the red line, and I think it's borne out during peak hour because I see tweets every now and then from folks that say, hey, the train's packed already out of Lakeline Station, that about 80% of the ridership on the red line comes from those outer suburbs, and that the inner portion of the red line doesn't perform quite as well from a ridership standpoint. So the vision plan, what that would do would be to basically bring the Leander trains down and connect with the Lone Star line and then head down Mopac to downtown, which is a much faster ride. It would shave a lot of time off that trip for people. So for those folks that are already riding the red line, they would get a faster ride downtown and make that trip more attractive. The inner portion of the red line would be converted into a branch of the city's urban rail system. And what the possibilities that opens up, we'd like to make that piece of the line more attractive to people to ride. So what the urban rail technology will allow us to do with the electrically powered cars is to have stations spaced much more close together, so you can create these, stations that are walkable. You don't have to drive to, where people can walk from the neighborhoods right to the train station, and also allow much more frequent service. The urban rail service is planned to have 10-minute frequency during peak hours. So, in a case like that, you almost don't even need to carry a paper timetable around with you. If you go to the station between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., gosh, I got a train every 10 minutes. I don't really care when the next one's leaving. I know there's going to be one pretty soon. So. Doing those things will make that inner red line, the inner portion of the red line, much more attractive from a ridership standpoint, and it will give the folks who are out on the Leander Lakeline portion of the line a faster ride downtown. So it's seen as kind of an overall system improvement. I hope that answers the question. I don't know if I got a little bit technical there.
Yeah, I think what Andrew is saying, well, the red line currently does this, comes around and terminates here at 4th Street downtown. And why aren't we going all the way across to Seaholm to connect to the rest of the commuter rail? Well, what the vision and plan says is that we would actually, what is now the red line, the commuter rail service would actually, as Joe was saying, come down to Mopac and connect through here anyway. So it would actually already be there. It wouldn't have to come across downtown. The commuter rail service would be there. So that changes the game a little bit. So hope we address that question with the vision. Hold on just a second. Okay, so we are getting close to having other folks who need to leave, but let me see if we can get 1 or 2 more questions. John suggests, please consider express service from Georgetown and Round Rock to downtown, i.e. the area slated for right-of-way preservation. Actually, I think that's a little confusing. This area, I think, is what you're referring to. That's not actually right-of-way preservation. That would be running express transit in express lanes. So that is part of the plan. We're hopeful that something that can accommodate that would be part of the Mobility 35 study or future studies. The right-of-way preservation is just this portion here east and southeast of Austin. We would, in the vision, again, conceptually, hope to provide express transit from Georgetown and Round Rock down the I-35 corridor, probably express transit in express lanes. So hopefully that meets what you're looking for. Let's do one more.
On the
go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, and of course we have the regional commuter rail serving that area. Sorry, Joe.
Right. I mean, our the train performance calculations that we've done, looking at what our schedule might be as we plan our train schedule, shows that we could achieve about a half-hour trip from Georgetown to downtown. So that's pretty quick.
Wow, Georgetown to downtown in 30 minutes. You can't drive that fast. I mean, Yeah, it's
Right.
2 in the morning. That's great. I'm looking forward to that. So it looks like Georgetown will, assuming everything in the vision happens the way we want it to, it looks like you'll be in good shape there, John. Last question. Richard says, has Project Connect considered any other rail link to the airport besides Riverside, for, e.g., using existing Metro Rail right-of-way and acquiring new right-of-way east of town? This could potentially be a much faster, higher volume link. Thanks. Well, we do have, Richard, in the vision plan, this connection down the, preserving the right-of-way that could potentially become a connection along this abandoned rail right-of-way. But we haven't, I don't believe, considered any kind of connection from anywhere else with high-capacity transit. That doesn't mean it wouldn't happen, but based on what we've looked at, the constraints, the demand, this is what we're looking at right now, just the Riverside link. And I can say part of the issue, and this is something that people who don't really get involved with designing transit may not think about right away, but it's not just about your origin and your destination, let's say downtown and Riverside. It's also what's on the way, because you can have a point A to point B service, and so the market you're serving is really only people trying to go between point A and point B. It's usually not going to be a successful service. However, if you have other destinations or trip generators along the way, then it becomes a much better, more effective service, if that's what you want. So, for example, Capital Metro currently runs a really good express or limited stop bus service from UT downtown out to the airport, and as Joe mentioned earlier, nobody was riding it. It was the worst, as far as productivity, bus in our service. And the reason is because it was going down 7th Street on the way to the airport, and there was no ridership on 7th Street. What we recently did was still connect UT and downtown, but put it down Riverside, which is a high, it's probably our second or third best transit corridor in the region. We put the Metro Airport, put a few stops here along Riverside, and the ridership on that Metro Airport route doubled almost overnight, because not only was it serving this market going between downtown and UT and the airport, but it was also serving the market of these folks on Riverside who maybe weren't going to downtown or the airport. They just needed a faster service to get to where they wanted to go. So it's, again, and I use that as an example, it's not just about the endpoints, it's about what's on the way as well. And that's probably why we're not looking at going between, Manor and the airport, because what's on the way, there's really not much on the way yet, or likely within the next 10 or 20 years. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of rationale for why we're only, at this point, looking at this one rail link. Anything else to add to that, Joe, the last question?
I would say, one of the other considerations that goes into all this is the ability to use transit to shape land uses and drive, appropriate development. And that Riverside corridor is one, it's got a lot of student populations, so there's a great existing market between there and UT. But it's also very ripe for a redevelopment to actually, use transit to help guide some of the development down there, and to kind of put it into this more sustainable corridor where you could have, very dense development, walkable spaces, live, work, play type spaces around the stations on Riverside. It's one of the corridors where that has one of the best chances to happen the way that we would hope it would happen. So, John Michael, you're exactly right. There are trips that don't involve just origin and destination. There are inner trips there that are served by that rail link. But there's also the question of economic development, which we don't always talk about very much when we're discussing our system plan. But that's an important part of it, is creating these sustainable development corridors along rail lines.
Well, thanks for that, Joe, and thanks, Jake, for joining me here. And there's about 26 of you still on the call. We've gone on for an hour and a half, and to respect everybody's time, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. If we didn't get to your question or comment, we will try to respond within the next few days via email. This is recorded. We'll get it up on the website as soon as possible. And you can visit us on our website, connectcentraltexas.com. You can also email us anytime at info@connectcentraltexas.com. Please stay tuned. Friend us on Facebook. Just look up, just search Project Connect on Facebook. Twitter, we're at connect_syntax. Follow us and continue to stay involved. Again, we're moving forward on this stuff. Get engaged in the North Corridor study. Get engaged with Urban Rail. We need your help to make this vision happen. And with that, we're going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you again, everybody, for participating.
Thanks, everybody.